The calm before the storm. The galaxy had always been a place of endless conflict, where empires rose and fell, and the drumbeats of war echoed through the cosmos. But among all the strife, one species remained a symbol of peace, the Selnari. Their world, Ela, was a place of serenity, vast oceans, dense forests, and fields of tall grass that swayed like a living tapestry beneath the twin suns. For centuries, the Selnari had chosen to live in quiet isolation, their philosophy of non-intervention and non-violence creating an impenetrable barrier between them and the galactic wars that constantly threatened the fragile peace of the galaxy. Despite their passivity, the Selnari were respected, even revered, by all other species. They had once been a part of the Galactic Council, an organization that sought to bring stability to the galaxy, but when the violence of the Council's debates reached a fever pitch, the Selnari had quietly withdrawn. They believed that the art of peace was not something that could be achieved through force, but through understanding, patience, and unwavering commitment to dialogue. The rest of the galaxy looked to the Selnari for wisdom, but they did not expect them to intervene. At least, they hadn't, until now. The news from the front lines of the war between the Zinthar Dominion and the Verderii Collective had spread like wildfire, reaching even the farthest corners of the galaxy. The Zinthar, a ruthless empire known for their militaristic expansionism, had set their sights on a neutral world in a strategic system, and humanity had come to the aid of the planet. The intervention had been swift and brutal. Humanity's forces had driven the Zinthar back, but the conflict had escalated quickly. Humanity, ever determined, had not withdrawn. In fact, they were now involved in a full-scale war with the Zinthar, and the balance of power in the galaxy was shifting. The United Earth Coalition, the governing body of humanity, was determined to stand their ground. Their military had proven to be more capable than anyone had anticipated, and their resourcefulness and adaptability on the battlefield were quickly gaining them allies among the more independent factions of the galaxy. But there were those who feared that humanity's rise, though impressive, would inevitably lead to chaos. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of powerful species before, and each had ultimately fallen prey to their own aggression. That was where the Selnari's dilemma lay. For centuries, they had maintained their neutrality, keeping their distance from galactic affairs. But now, with the rise of humanity, a species that had never known true peace, they could no longer remain uninvolved. The question was not whether they should intervene, but whether humanity's potential for peace still existed, whether they could rise above their violent past and choose a different future. It was a question that weighed heavily on Kenare, the High Elder of the Selnari. Kenare sat in a quiet meditation chamber, a simple room made of stone and light, overlooking the serene hills of Ela. Her mind was calm, as it always was, but even she could not ignore the sense of impending tension that had begun to gnaw at her. The universe was on the brink of something monumental, and humanity stood at the center of it. Across the galaxy, the United Earth Coalition had sent Elena Voss, a seasoned diplomat, to open formal negotiations with the Selnari. Elena was a rising star in the Coalition's diplomatic corps, intelligent, charismatic, and unafraid to speak her mind. She had been chosen for this mission not only because of her skill as a negotiator, but also because she was one of the few humans who had studied the Selnari deeply. She knew that the Selnari valued peace above all else, but they also understood the importance of timing. Humanity's history was marred by war, but Elena believed that peace was possible. She was determined to prove it to the Selnari. Elena's ship entered the orbit of Ela just as the twin suns began to set, casting a warm, golden hue across the planet's surface. As the ship descended, Elena gazed out the window, feeling a deep sense of reverence for the world below. She had heard stories of Ela's beauty, but nothing could prepare her for the sight of it in person. The Selnari had built their society on this world's tranquility, and it was evident in every aspect of their existence. Upon landing, Elena was greeted by a delegation of Selnari dignitaries, their faces serene and composed. They led her to Kenare, the High Elder, who awaited her in the central hall of the Great Temple, a sprawling structure carved into the side of a massive cliff overlooking an endless expanse of ocean. Ambassador Voss, Kenare said, her voice soft but commanding. "Welcome to Ela." Elena bowed slightly, her heart pounding. This was a moment that could change everything for humanity. "Hi, Elder," Elena began, her voice steady. "I come on behalf of humanity, seeking your wisdom and guidance. The war with the Zinthar has reached a critical point, and we need your help, your influence, to bring peace to the galaxy." Kenare studied Elena for a long moment, her eyes filled with a depth of understanding that seemed to transcend time itself. "You seek peace, Ambassador," she said slowly. "But can your people truly embrace it, even in the face of war?" Elena took a deep breath, knowing that this was the heart of the matter. "We can. We must." Kenare did not respond immediately. Instead, she motioned for Elena to sit beside her, overlooking the vast, tranquil expanse. "You will have to show us, Ambassador. Humanity's path is uncertain. We will watch, and we will wait. Show us that you are worthy of peace." The challenge was clear, and the weight of it hung between them like an invisible thread. Humanity had come to the Selnari for help, but whether they could prove themselves worthy of that help was a question that still remained. The storm was coming, and only time would tell whether humanity could weather it. The turning point. Elena Voss sat in her quarters aboard the sleek diplomatic vessel Phoenix, staring out at the stars. The soft hum of the ship's engines was a faint background noise to the pounding of her heart. The meeting with Kenare had left her with more questions than answers. The Selnari had given humanity a challenge. But what if they failed? Could humanity rise to the occasion? Or were they doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past? Elena had been trained for moments like this, but nothing could have prepared her for the weight of the Selnari's words. "Show us that you are worthy of peace." How? How could humanity, a species whose history was written in the blood of war, possibly prove it was capable of such an extraordinary transformation? She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. The images from her meeting with Kenare still lingered in her mind. The High Elder's serene face, her calm but penetrating gaze, the way her voice seemed to resonate with the ancient wisdom of the universe itself. Elena had never met anyone like her. But was that enough to convince the Selnari to stand with humanity? The distant chime of a message broke Elena from her reverie. It was a secure transmission from Earth. She opened it, revealing the familiar face of her superior, Ambassador Gregor Solis. "Elena," Gregor began, his voice filled with barely contained frustration. "We've received reports from the front lines. The Zinthar are pushing back, hard. Your peace talks are stalling, and the military is growing more desperate. We need a breakthrough, or we risk losing everything." Elena swallowed, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. "I understand, Gregor. But the Selnari are not going to be swayed by military victories. This is about more than just strategy. It's about proving that humanity is ready to change." Gregor's expression hardened, and for a moment, Elena thought he might argue further. But instead, he sighed. "You have one chance, Elena. The Selnari are watching. We need them, but we need results. The galaxy is on the brink, and humanity can't afford to wait." The transmission ended, leaving Elena staring at the empty screen. The pressure was mounting, and the stakes had never been higher. The next few days were a blur of meetings and strategy sessions, as Elena worked tirelessly to find a way to prove humanity's commitment to peace. The United Earth Coalition's military leaders, including General Marcus Kincaid, were growing increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress. Kincaid, a veteran of countless battles, had no patience for diplomacy. He believed that humanity's survival depended on defeating the Zinthar once and for all, not talking. "Elena," Kincaid said during one heated meeting, "the Zinthar aren't going to stop until they've crushed us. We can't afford to play nice with them. We need to end this war now, before they take our colonies and slaughter our people." Elena looked across the table at the hardened general. His face was set in a grim expression, his jaw clenched as he spoke. She understood his anger, but she also knew that if they didn't prove humanity's capacity for peace, they risked losing everything, not just to the Zinthar, but to the galaxy itself. The Selnari were watching, and humanity's next move would determine their future. "We can't win this war with weapons alone," General, Elena said, her voice steady. We need to show the galaxy that humanity is willing to take the hard road, choosing peace, even when victory seems within our grasp. Kincaid's eyes narrowed. And how do you propose we do that? Elena took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. We'll offer the Zinthar a ceasefire. Not just a truce, but an open invitation to discuss terms. We'll show them that humanity is ready to negotiate, that we're not interested in total annihilation. And if the Selnari agree, we can broker a peace. The room fell silent. The idea was bold, perhaps too bold, but it was the only option that could prove humanity's commitment to peace. The question was whether anyone, especially the Zinthar, would believe them. As the days passed, Elena and her team worked tirelessly to send word to the Zinthar commanders, offering a ceasefire. The message was carefully crafted, emphasizing humanity's willingness to negotiate, to put an end to the bloodshed and find a solution that benefited all parties. It was a gamble. If the Zinthar rejected the offer, humanity would lose its last chance at peace. If they accepted, they could be walking into a fragile, dangerous negotiation that could make or break their future. Meanwhile, the Selnari remained silent. Elena had hoped for some sign of support or encouragement, but there was none. They had told her they would watch, and that was what they did, patiently, quietly, from the shadows. Then, just as the pressure seemed unbearable, a reply came from the Zinthar. Elena sat in her quarters, staring at the holographic message. It was brief, cold, and utterly lacking in hope. The Zinthar demanded total surrender, offering nothing in return. Elena felt her heart sink. The Zinthar were not interested in peace. They were interested in domination. She stood, pacing the small room. The path forward was now clear. They could either continue the war and risk further destruction, or they could defy the Zinthar's demands and seek a path that was even more uncertain. But there was something inside Elena, something she had learned from the Selnari, that refused to let her give up. Humanity had chosen peace before. She was determined that they would do it again. And with that resolve, Elena sent her reply, a simple, unyielding message to the Zinthar. We will not surrender. We will negotiate. It was a declaration of humanity's intent, but also a plea for the galaxy to see them for what they truly could be, more than just warriors. Now, it was up to the galaxy to decide if they could truly believe in that vision. Trials of humanity. The silence that followed Elena Voss's message to the Zinthar felt like an eternity. She stood in her quarters aboard the Phoenix, staring out into the infinite expanse of space. The stars twinkled, cold and indifferent, as if mocking her uncertainty. A fragile peace hung in the air, and every second felt like a countdown to something catastrophic. Elena had known that sending the message would be a gamble, but the stakes were higher than she had anticipated. The Zinthar had rejected their ceasefire offer with typical arrogance, and now humanity's reputation hung by a thread. If humanity was to prove its capacity for peace, it had to rise above its darker instincts, something that seemed increasingly difficult as the war with the Zinthar raged on. The situation on Earth was no better. Political leaders and military commanders were divided, with tensions mounting over whether humanity should continue its push for peace or double down on military action. Elena's communications with Ambassador Gregor Solis had become strained, and even her allies in the diplomatic corps were beginning to question her approach. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Elena turned to see Captain Lena Dre, one of her closest colleagues and a former military officer, standing in the doorway. Her expression was grim. "Ambassador," Captain Dre said, stepping inside. "We've received an encrypted message from the Zinthar. It's not good." Elena nodded, her stomach tightening. "Show me." Captain Dre activated the holographic display, and the cold, calculating face of a Zinthar commander appeared. His words were crisp, full of disdain. "Humanity's offer for peace is a joke. You will submit to the Zinthar Dominion, or we will wipe you from the stars. Consider this your final warning." The transmission ended with a flicker, leaving Elena staring at the empty air. She felt a wave of frustration wash over her, but she kept her voice steady. "They've made their position clear," Elena said softly. "But we can't back down now. We've already sent the message. If we let them dictate the terms, humanity loses any chance at redemption. Captain Dre crossed her arms, her expression tight with concern. You're right, Ambassador, but there's another issue. The military is pushing hard for an offensive. They are saying we can't afford to keep pursuing diplomacy when the Zinthar are so close to wiping out our fleets. General Kincaid's already preparing a full-scale assault. Elena sighed, rubbing her temples. She had expected this. The military saw war as the only language the Zinthar understood, but she had hoped they would give diplomacy a little more time. The clock was ticking, and every day the pressure mounted. She needed a way to convince the military and the rest of humanity that the path to peace was still worth fighting for. The next day, Elena found herself in a tense meeting with General Marcus Kincaid and the top military brass. The atmosphere was thick with frustration. Kincaid stood at the head of the table, his posture rigid and aggressive, while the others sat in tense silence. I don't know how much longer we can wait for a diplomatic miracle, Kincaid growled, his voice low. The Zinthar are pushing into our outer colonies. Our forces are stretched thin, and we can't afford another round of negotiations that'll end in more threats and empty promises. Elena met his gaze with determination. We have to stay the course, General. We've shown the galaxy that humanity is capable of peace. If we give up now, we will lose everything. Our reputation, our values, our future. Kincaid's eyes narrowed. Our reputation. With all due respect, Ambassador, reputation doesn't win wars. Weapons do. You saw the message from the Zinthar. They are laughing at us. If we don't act now, we'll be nothing but another casualty in their conquest. Elena took a deep breath, steeling herself. She had known this wouldn't be easy, but now it felt like the very heart of humanity's future was at stake. What if I told you that we don't have to win this war by destroying the Zinthar? What if we could turn the tide without firing another shot? The room fell silent as the military leaders exchanged skeptical looks. Elena pressed on, her voice steady. I'm not suggesting we back down, but the Zinthar are not invincible. They've been built on fear and domination, but they are not immune to change. What if, instead of continuing the conflict, we offered them an alliance? What if we presented humanity as a force of balance, not just war? If the Selnari, if their philosophy of peace, could influence the galaxy, why not humanity? Kincaid shook his head, scoffing at the suggestion. You're asking me to believe that the Zinthar will join hands with us after everything that's happened. You've got to be kidding. I'm not asking you to believe it, Elena said firmly. I'm asking you to trust that humanity can be something more. This is about our future, not just the war. The galaxy is watching us. The Selnari are watching us. And the rest of the galaxy is beginning to believe that humanity can't be trusted. Kincaid's eyes darkened. So what do you want me to do? Cancel the offensive? Just stop fighting. Elena's gaze didn't waver. Yes, I want you to trust that the offensive is not the only way forward. We've proven that humanity is capable of war. Now it's time to show that we can win with peace. The room was quiet. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. For the first time, Kincaid seemed to pause, his expression softening just slightly. I'll give you more time, Kincaid said after a long pause, his voice gruff. But if the Zinthar don't respond, we'll be forced to act. Understand? Elena nodded, her heart pounding. I understand, General. And thank you. As the meeting ended, Elena stepped out into the hallway, her mind racing. The military's shift wasn't a full endorsement of her approach, but it was a step in the right direction. She still had time, just a little more. But the road ahead was treacherous. If the Zinthar rejected humanity's peace offer again, there might be no turning back. She knew the path to peace would be long and fraught with obstacles, but the challenge was clear. The galaxy and humanity's future hung in the balance. The edge of hope. The days following the meeting with General Kincaid were tense. The military's begrudging acceptance of her diplomatic efforts had given Elena Voss a slim window to work with. Yet, each passing hour seemed to stretch the limits of her patience, as the threat of full-scale war loomed larger on the horizon. The Zinthar's response to humanity's offer of peace had been unequivocal: surrender or be destroyed. They had dismissed humanity's plea as weak, a tactic to buy time for a doomed resistance. But Elena could not give up. She knew that the window she had been granted was fragile. The moment she would lose the support of the military, all-wise, the Selnari's trust, would be the moment that humanity's place in the galaxy would be sealed, either as a warmonger or, perhaps, a force for something greater. Her thoughts were interrupted by the chime of an incoming transmission. Elena's heart skipped a beat as she saw the sender's name. Kinare, High Elder of the Selnari. It had been days since their last exchange, and in that time, the Selnari had remained silent, watching with impassive eyes. With a deep breath, Elena activated the holocom. The serene face of Kinare appeared, her features soft but filled with an ancient, knowing calm. Ambassador Voss, Kinare greeted her. I've been watching closely. I'm listening, High Elder, Elena replied, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. Kinare's gaze never wavered, her eyes seeming to look past the physical realm into something deeper. Humanity's courage is evident, but courage alone does not guarantee peace. Your people are on the precipice of a choice, Ambassador, one that could change the course of your history. Elena leaned forward, her pulse quickening. I'm not asking for humanity to be perfect, but we need a chance. We need to show that peace is possible, even with the Zinthar. Can you help us? There was a long pause before Kinare responded. The Zinthar are a powerful force, one built on conquest. Their empire thrives on fear, and they will not yield easily. Yet, I sense something in you, Elena Voss. There is potential in humanity that resonates with the very foundation of peace. But do your people understand this potential? Do they understand the price? Elena swallowed, the weight of Kinare's words sinking into her chest. She had been so focused on convincing the galaxy that humanity could be something better. But had she fully grasped what that truly meant? Peace was not just the absence of war. It was the presence of understanding, humility, and restraint. Could humanity live up to those ideals when pressed to the very edge of destruction? I believe they can, Elena said softly, her voice firm with resolve. But I need your help, High Elder. We can't do this alone. Kinare regarded her silently for a moment. Then it is time to offer your people a choice. A choice between the path you have walked, or a path that has never been taken before. A path to peace through understanding, not dominance. Elena's eyes widened, the implications of Kinare's words slowly becoming clear. What do you mean? The Selnari do not intervene lightly, Ambassador, Kinare explained, her tone measured. But the Zinthar's refusal to even consider peace shows their weakness. If you are to save your people and preserve the galaxy's balance, you must confront them with more than just words. You must give them a choice they cannot ignore. The following day, Elena prepared to make her boldest move yet. She gathered her team, including Captain Lenadre and a handful of the brightest diplomatic minds from the United Earth Coalition. Together, they crafted a message to the Zinthar, a message that would carry more than just words. It would be an ultimatum, but not one of destruction. It would offer them something they had never considered, the choice to negotiate peace under terms that would require them to relinquish their aggressive stance in exchange for a future free of war. The message was simple but profound. We are not your enemy, but we will no longer be your prey. The text of the message was then delivered to the Zinthar through secure channels, but Elena knew it wasn't just the content that mattered. It was the timing. The Zinthar had always used fear and intimidation to rule their empire. But now, humanity was offering them a choice. And behind that choice, the Selnari's influence loomed like a shadow, unseen, but ever-present. Elena's heart pounded as she transmitted the message, and for the first time, she felt a sense of power, not because of the words, but because humanity was taking control of its destiny. They were no longer asking for peace. They were demanding it. As the hours passed, the tension in the diplomatic quarters aboard the Phoenix became unbearable. Elena paced restlessly, every moment stretching into eternity. The response from the Zinthar would either solidify humanity's place in the galaxy or doom it forever. Then, at last, the message arrived. The transmission came through with a garbled signal. But the words that followed were unmistakable. You dare challenge the Dominion? Your people are weak, but perhaps there is something different about your offer. We will meet you on neutral ground. Come alone. Bring your peace, if you truly have it. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The Zinthar were willing to meet, but this was not a surrender. It was a test, one that would demand everything humanity had to offer. Captain Dre was the first to speak. Are we really doing this, Ambassador? They'll expect us to come with our best negotiators, but they could betray us. They've done it before. Elena nodded slowly, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. We don't have a choice. This is our chance to show them, and the galaxy, that humanity is capable of something more than war. We will go. We'll meet them, and we will prove that we can choose peace, no matter the cost. As Elena made her preparations, she couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this negotiation, was more than just a battle for peace. It was humanity's defining test, and it would determine whether the galaxy would see them as conquerors or something else entirely. A force for balance, for change, for hope. The time for waiting was over. The choice was now in their hands.